Hello everyone and welcome back to the Crafty Yellow Camper, and today I'm going to show you how to make a floating card using acetate and strips of cardstock. This is one that I prepared earlier. Okay, so this is a really good technique for using up your scraps of cardstock. You can use coloured papers, you can use cardstock. I'm going to be using this Well Done stamp set, so my inspiration is drawn from the sea, so to speak, and so I have used 3 different colours of blues. So I have some Bermuda Bay strips, some Pacific Point strips, and some Coastal Cabana strips. Okay, unfortunately I didn't realise until, oh no, you can tell the difference. I can say Coastal Cabana and Bermuda Bay do look very similar, but they are a dark and a light shade. Okay, so I've got my piece of acetate here. Hopefully you can see that. I'm just starting with a scrap that I'll cut down later of acetate. So the first thing I'm going to do is start building up my pattern. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've put some double-sided tape onto the back of my card strips. You could use wet glue, but I find that slides about quite a lot on something like this. Now I'm using my grid paper to roughly line up the strips, and all I'm doing is removing the back of the sticky paper and sticking them down. So I'm going in a bit of an order. So we've got a Pacific Point, and you need to leave a gap between your pieces. Now it's entirely up to you how much of a gap you leave. You could leave a whole square of grid paper if you wanted a more open look. I'm going for a slightly more closed up look, so I'm just going to go for a slightly smaller piece there. So shorter gap, I should say, or smaller gap. So rather than waste cardstock and sticky back tape, you can cut your pieces down. I've cut these at 1 centimetre, and you can do them some thinner, some thicker. You can do sorry, I'm trying to think and cut at the same time. You can do a variety of thickness and thinness if you wanted to get a different effect. As I said, you could use patterned papers. It would look quite nice in DSP, which is Designer Series paper. So you'd be able to use up all your trimmings. I know us crafters don't like to throw anything away. I've got a big box of bits of cardstock under my desk, and every now and again I do have to go through it and throw out some of the bits and pieces. Otherwise it gets to the stage where I've got so much under there. Right, okay, so you don't need to see me sticking down lots of pieces of paper. I think you get the idea. So what I've done for this card is I have die cut this. I'll just put one more piece on just so we've finished our repeating pattern and you get the idea. I have die cut mine using one of the Stampin' Up oval dies. The only thing I would say is, even with my new Stampin' Up cutting and embossing machine, and I might as well finish this now I've started, mightn't I? It did take a few runs through to get it to cut, and you may have to, that one's a little bit short, but it doesn't matter, I'm going to cut an oval. You may have to run a shim through with it. Okay, so once you've got all your pieces stuck down like I have there, then what you do, you can see I've stuck it to my table. It stopped at moving it around, so just the edges have gone over. So lift it up off your table, and then when you're die cutting, cutting in the trimmer, it makes it easier if you just go along the edge and just remove those bits that hung over the edge of the acetate. Just so, I mean, you might like it stuck down in your die cutting machine to stop it moving if you don't have a magnetic plate, in which case ignore this step. You don't have to die cut it. You can die cut it, you can punch through it, if you've got a big enough punch, you can just cut it. So that's got all my trimmings off there. Okay, and you can see there now we get that floating effect. Now I'm going to skip a step because you don't need to see me die cutting something, but that is how you start. So you either then trim that down. Oops, sorry, bang the camera. Trim that down to the size of the panel that you want for your card, or you can do what I've done, and I'll bring in the one I did earlier, and I've just used, as I said, one of the Stampin' Up layered oval dies to cut that out. Okay, so let's get our card put together. As I said, we're using the Well Done set, which is an undersea effect. So I've got my piece of Whisper White cardstock for my matte layer, and then I've got some Balmy Blue, and this is just half of an A4 sheet cut across the width of the sheet. Okay, so if I hold this cardstock up over the top of the card, you'll see that you get that floating effect with the acetate. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'll put my card base to one side. Rather than just stick this on a white piece, I want to do some decorating around the outside. So what I'm going to do is bring in some inks that match our cardstock. So first of all, I've got Bermuda Bay. Okay, and I'm just going to stamp some of the seaweed to one side of the card, and then I'm going to bring in some Flirty Flamingo ink, and I'm going to stamp some of the coral. Let's get that the right way up, might help, mightn't it? I'm not sure which way up it is meant to go, but I think it's that way. There we go. Yep. So we're just going to add some of the coral in there at the bottom. Okay, and then I have got the little fishes. So we're just going to have some of them in a little shoal swimming across, and then our piece is going to sit there like that. Okay, I'm going to bring in some scrap paper, and the Pacific Point ink that I just used, I'm going to bring that back. Just used that for the little shoal of fishes. I'm going to ink up the whale. Let's see. Now, if you're using a punch, which I'm going to, this is the whale punch that goes with that Well Done set. When you are stamping your image on a piece of scrap, make sure you get it the right way up so that you can post it in. So I've just had a look to see that my whale is going to go that way. So I'm just going to stamp him down. Okay, there he is. So I'm going to open up our punch and then feed this in from the top, and then it should be the right way around. Okie dokie, so there he fits in. Oh, fits in there like that. Just give him a squeeze. And you do get some other bits and pieces, but we don't want those right now. Okay, so I'll just brush those bits off there. Okay, and we've got our whale who's going to sit half on there. So obviously there's still quite a lot of white area on there, so we've got our undersea foliage. So what I'm going to do is bring in one of our blending brushes. These are our new blending brushes. They come in a pack of 3. I think they're about 11 or 12 pounds off the top of my head, and they have got really soft bristles. That almost looks, I'm holding that up quite close to the camera for you, that looks like a foam pad, but you can see as I'm doing that, it isn't, it's bristles. So we're just going to bring in a very light blue. So, my goodness, I think we're emptying my entire blue section at the moment. We're going to bring in some Pool Party. And we are going to just ink. So always start off and come in. We're just going to ink over the rest of that white cardstock. And this is very pale. My Pool Party ink pad, I think, really needs re-inking. But the purpose of this is not to turn at the colour of the undersea. I just want to take the whiteness away. So this is actually fine for that, but I will have to find my re-inker. Okay, that's that done. And another tip for you, I've noticed that all of these blending brushes are very narrow here where the brush head meets the neck, and there is a certain amount of flexibility, but I always try and make sure that the pressure is on this part of the brush, not the handle, which puts stress on the neck. And I have had one of these brushes snap on me. In fairness, it wasn't a Stampin' Up one. It was before we bought ours out. But obviously you want to look after your things. So just a little word of warning to put the pressure on the brush and not here. Okay, so that's just taken the white off there. So I'm going to bring in my Stampin' Seal. You can use wet glue if you like, but for speed, I'm just going to use this. Oops. Just run some round the back of our card and across the middle, just to make sure we're stuck properly. I'm going to bring our card base in. As I always say, open it out so that you're not trying to stick something to something that's bouncing around. And we're going to add that to our card like that. Okay, and then we've got our floating panel, which is going to go there. Now I'm going to put some mini dimensionals on the back of that because I want that raised up a little bit, but obviously you need to make sure that wherever you're putting dimensionals, you need to make sure that they are on the card strips so they don't show through. And that is why, so I'm turning it over because we don't want to see the double-sided tape. So I'm just going to add some mini dimensionals onto the cardstock sections. We don't need loads, just enough to hold it up. And obviously depending on the size of the strips you choose to cut, if you were to try this, you might be able to use the larger dimensionals. Okay, so I'm just trying to make sure that that's fairly well covered. I've probably gone a bit overkill on there, to be fair. And my usual tip, press your thumbnail into the middle of the pads if you struggle to get the backs off, and this will flick up the backs for you. I'm just going to take that out of shot for a minute while I flick all the backs into my bin. These things get everywhere. I find them when I'm holding classes in my home pre-COVID. I used to find them for days afterwards. They come off and they flick everywhere. My craft room floor is always covered in them. It's never clean. Okay, so we're just going to pop that up there like that. Okay, and then we're going to bring in our whale. Just because they're out, I'm popping mini dimensionals on him, but usually I would put bigger dimensionals on the back of a image this size. So we don't need as many. There we go. So just remove that and take out the backs off, I should say, sorry, rather than trying to flick those all over my floor and try and clear them up later. If you can hear the pinging of my iPad, I'm really sorry. I keep turning it off. It keeps turning itself back on again. And we're just going to have our whale swimming across that piece of cardstock. So you can use this technique for different sizes, different shapes. Basically, if you've got a die or a large punch, you can make whatever that shape is. As I said, you could, if you wanted to, do the entire front of the card. So if I bring back in that piece of acetate that we were making earlier, you can see that I could cut that down to be the entire size of the card. So I hope you like that. That's just a quick and simple way to make a different effect using your cardstock strips. So don't throw those strips away, put them somewhere and save them. And you can have a go at this technique. So that's all for me from... I'll start again and put my teeth in. That is all from me for now, and I will see you again soon. Happy stamping. Bye.